If you're a fan of modern Mazdas and you're looking for a tow vehicle to pull, say, a race car, a small boat, a camper, you really didn't have a lot of options. Mazda had the CX-9, their big 3-row unibody crossover, but it wasn't rated for more than about 3,500 pounds of trailer weight, which honestly isn't going to be enough for a lot of people and is not competitive in the class that it plays in. Now we've got something all new that replaces the CX-9, and I'm here to talk about it and tow with it. This is Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the all-new Mazda CX-90. This is the replacement for the Mazda CX-9. It is completely unrelated. It's on a new platform with new engines, and it can tow 5,000 pounds. So let's talk all about what this thing is, and then as you can see, I have a race car on a trailer behind me, and we're going to talk all about how this thing tows, because most of these that are in press fleets don't have hitches on them, but this one does, so we're going to do it. So before we do all that, let's talk about what this thing is, because like I said, it's not related to a CX-9 at all. So Mazda CX-90, what is it? Like I said, this replaces the CX-9. It is completely unrelated to the CX-9. It's on an all-new platform, and it is not related to the also newish, smaller CX-50 2-row crossover. This is a new, unique platform. So this is a rear-wheel drive based setup. This is going to be all-wheel drive. Every CX-90 is all-wheel drive, but the platform itself is rear biased, and in theory, you could have a rear-wheel drive only vehicle on this platform, but that is a topic for another day. In any case, these are all-wheel drive, and it is going to be a rear biased all-wheel drive system, and normally Mazda says up to 80% of the power is sent to the back wheels, which means it drives very rear biased. Now, if you need it, it will send power toward the front. It does it all automatically, and it can send up to 50% of the available power and torque to these front wheels on demand. No buttons to push, no levers to pull. It does it all for you. It's standard all-wheel drive. Now, speaking of power and torque, we've got two different drivetrains going on in the CX-90 with a third on the way. So this one is using an all-new engine that Mazda has created. It is an inline 6-cylinder. I am so pumped about that because the sound of an inline 6 is just phenomenal. This is a 3.3 liter inline 6-cylinder. It is new, it is Mazda's design, it is not pulled from anywhere. 3.3 liters, it is turbocharged, and it is a mild hybrid. So it's one of those 48-volt mild hybrid setups that has kind of a starter generator deal with a belt and a very small battery. It's not gonna drive on the battery on its own. It's just using that to help kind of shove the engine into the torque band and, you know, help with auto start stop at stoplights, that sort of thing. Now, this is the Turbo S. There's also the Turbo. The Turbo is going to be less power and I think similar torque. However, we're talking about the most powerful one they offer here. So this is the Turbo S. This is going to be 340 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. There is also a plug-in hybrid version that's either on sale now or coming very soon, depending on when you're watching this video, and that is going to use Mazda's naturally aspirated 2.5 liter 4-cylinder with a bigger battery, a bigger electric motor, all that good stuff, to be a PHEV. But if you want to tow 5,000 pounds, this is the one you need. You need either of the inline 6-cylinders to do the 5,000 pound rating. The PHEV will only be rated at 3,500 pounds. So we also have talked transmissions because Mazda has been kind of known for sticking with their tried and true 6-speed automatic, which honestly I found to be pretty fine, but this girl has an 8-speed, and it's not a torque converter automatic. It's weird, and I don't totally understand how it works, but I'm gonna try and explain it to you now. Mazda explained all of this at this car's launch to an outlet called Motor Authority, and I'm gonna pull up the crude drawing that they gave to Motor Authority, or Motor Authority writer sketched, because this explains it better than I could without the visual, but I didn't draw it. Anyway, you have the engine here. You have the transmission here-ish. In between, you have an electric motor in the bell housing of the transmission, but there's no torque converter. The electric motor kind of acts as a torque converter, and then there's a wet clutch. So there's a wet clutch here, and then you've got the rest of the transmission goes to say here, and then there's, you know, a drive shaft that sends power to the back wheels to the differential. There's also a wet clutch back there. So there are two wet clutches. This is not a dual clutch transmission. If you think of it that way, like a Volkswagen DSG or a Porsche PDK, it's not that. It's a different setup. I don't entirely understand it because I'm not an engineer. Other people can better explain this whole thing, but the electric motor basically takes the place of the torque converter at low speeds, and then the wet clutches do their thing to move power where it needs to be moved. Now, suspension-wise, for the sake of towing, none of these CX-90s are going to come with adaptive suspension. None of them come with load-leveling rear suspension, none of that. This is a fixed-rate, steel spring, fixed damper sort of setup. So on the plus side, you kind of have what you have. You don't have to worry about anything. And it should be fairly low maintenance because you don't have to worry about airbags in the back or anything like that. So that is the suspension that you're going to get. Now let's move around to the back and talk about towing and payload. All right, some more about towing and payload. So like I mentioned, most of these in the press fleets don't have a trailer hitch on them right now. And I asked, and Mazda, thank you, Mazda, they installed one for me so I could do this video. So really appreciate that. But what that means is you have to make sure that your CX-90 is going to be equipped with the trailer package because it's not gonna be something standard. That's, you know, what you get with all these crossovers. It's always an option. But in this case, they installed it for me. Standard 2-inch receiver back here, and then you get a 7-pin trailer wiring connector. You don't get a 4-pin. So if you're gonna be pulling like a boat or a U-Haul trailer, those use 4-pin, and you can buy a little cheapy adapter, you know, 10, 20 bucks, and it'll work just fine. Now, I am using a hitch with a rise on it. This hitch is fairly low, and this is pretty standard practice for a lot of these crossovers. They sit so much lower than a pickup truck, so instead of having a drop hitch on a pickup truck, you actually want a rise hitch that comes up. So I just flip the hitch over, and this works out to probably a 2-inch rise, and obviously your trailer and everything will vary here. Now, 5,000 pounds of trailering weight here, that means you can have about 10% on the tongue, which is roughly 500 pounds. In this case, we're a touch under that. I'm towing with an aluminum Trailex trailer, so those weigh about 1,300 pounds. It's gonna be about 500 to 700 pounds lighter than a comparable steel trailer. And then the car I'm pulling is around 2,600 pounds there. So we are getting close to the CX-90's limits. We're not quite on them. We could use a steel trailer and a slightly heavier car, but this is what I had courtesy of my friend Rob. Now, with that towing capacity and that tongue weight, we have to talk payload. So payload is the total combined weight of occupants and cargo. Normally you wouldn't think about that too much in day-to-day driving, but if you're towing, you really need to think about this because overloading the CX-90 or any other vehicle while you're towing can cause issues with acceleration, braking, handling, and steering in particular, safety overall, and honestly, it can cause issues with liability if you happen to be in a crash. So that is something to really watch for. Now, the concern I have here with payload with all of these crossovers is that you're not gonna have much left. So if you want to take your family of 4 and your race car to the track for the weekend, can you do it? This one's going to be a little tight. The payload on this car is rated at 1,020 pounds, so effectively 1,000 pounds. What that means is if you've got your car and trailer hooked up here, and let's say we're at 5,000 pounds, because I'm not a math person, you have to take 500 pounds off of that payload because tongue weight counts as cargo. So we take 500 pounds off, we can all do this math at home, that leaves you about 500 pounds available in the CX-90 for you, any of your gear, if you've got a weekend bag or something, and any of your passengers and their stuff. So you could probably do you and your gear, maybe a friend, maybe. If you and your friends don't eat, you could do you and a friend or two, but it's gonna be tight on payload. Now, the thing to keep in mind here, this is a loaded CX-90 Turbo S Premium Plus, so this has every option on it. If you get a lower trim that doesn't have all of the features that this one does, it will be a lighter vehicle and it will give you a little bit more payload. So you might get another 100 pounds, 200 pounds out of it, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it really can make a difference. Now, the final thing to talk about, since we're back here, you'll notice I've got the trailer hooked up through the 7-pin. CX-90 does not have a trailer brake controller, so we have to set one up here. I'm going to use a Takancha Prodigy RF. I will show you what that looks like because I have to set it up. So the Prodigy RF is this guy right here. This just goes on your trailer tongue and then plugs in with your trailer going right here, and then it gives you another 7-pin to plug into your tow vehicle, and it works completely wirelessly with no modification to your tow vehicle. Obviously, if this were your own CX-90, you could certainly set something up full time, but given I have to give this back tomorrow morning, you all don't know what tomorrow is, but I do, I have to give it back, so we're not gonna modify anything. So let me get this all set up, and then we'll get on the road and talk all about how the CX-90 tows 5,000 pounds. right, so let's talk about towing with the Mazda CX-90. So we are headed toward the highway so I can do an acceleration run, but first impressions right off the bat, for the sake of power delivery, this engine is fantastic. We'll do a little bit more with that here when we get on the highway and get some actual acceleration going on, but it sounds great, and we'll get more into that in just a second. Now, while we're at a stoplight, couple things to talk about. So Mazda has what they call iStop, which is auto start stop. And they're using the 48 volt mild hybrid system to help make that smoother, to help the engine stay off longer. A lot of manufacturers are doing that. It does help with fuel economy, and versus a traditional auto start stop setup, it does generally work better. However, in this case, the iStop system, it has done it. It did it at my last stoplight with the trailer attached, which is interesting because most of them disable, but in any case, it is not the smoothest thing with this inline six cylinder. And I find that interesting because inline sixes themselves are usually buttery, creamy, delightful in how they sound, how they shake, how they don't shake, how they deliver power, all that good stuff. And this one is. We'll talk about that more in a second, but it's just an odd little thing here. All right, away we go. Now, you might have heard a little clunk. That's kind of endemic to every unibody tow vehicle because the hitch has some slop with the receiver, and that happens on pickup trucks and other body on frame vehicles as well. You just don't hear it or feel it because you're not connected to the frame. But with a unibody, that kind of happens. There's these little things you can put in the receiver to take up that slack. But in any case, let's get on the highway and talk about this CX-90. One thing I've noticed is that the transmission is very eager to be out of first gear, even in the tow mode. There is a dedicated towing mode on the MI drive selector here, and it just wants to upshift at like 2 miles an hour, which, fine, thankfully there's other gears you can use. And with that, let's do some acceleration. So my foot's in it here. This feels pretty good up to about 5,000, 5,500 RPM. It makes power nicely all the way to there. It will rev to about 6,500, but it feels kind of tapped out at that RPM range. But you don't need to do that. That was my foot all the way in it just to see how it felt. Otherwise, you know, this makes plenty of power and torque down low. It sounds fantastic, and it's a really silky, buttery engine. I really, really enjoy that. Transmission is nicely behaved here. It's been a little like shuddery clunky at different times around town with no trailer. It's behaving much better with the trailer attached. So just kind of an interesting little thing that I've noticed. And you know, some of that behavior, this is a new transmission for Mazda. I had something similar happen with a Ford truck I owned where they worked out some of the kinks later on with a software update. So some of this, you know, might need a little refining as things move along, as people drive them and you know, put a few more miles on them than the development miles. And they can always tweak things as they get some owner feedback. But it's doing a really nice job with the trailer. The ride with the trailer hooked up, this is fantastic. I think this car is fairly stiff. It reminds me a little of my Porsche Cayenne and how it handles and how the suspension is set up in general. When it's unloaded, it feels kind of stiff. In city driving, it feels kind of stiff. On the highway, on an off-ramp, and with this trailer, it's doing a very nice job. You know, it's very good control, nice body control. Generally, you would want a weight distribution hitch if you're doing more than 50% of the vehicle's weighted trailer load. In this case, we're not, because everything I'm using is borrowed, and my friend who tows this doesn't use one, and it's a Trailex, it's all fairly light, but it's doing just fine. You know, steering feels good, and the steering feel in general on this is pretty good, but steering feels nice. Yeah, this is handling all this quite well. And then as we take an exit here and we'll slow down, I drove a CX-50 that has the towing mode, and I thought it wasn't really aggressive enough with its downshifting to try and engine brake and slow the vehicle. You probably can't hear it here, but this is doing a nice job of actually downshifting, slowing you, and making everything a little better. Now, I am using that trailer brake controller, which helps as well. You really need that if you're towing anything, unless you've got a trailer with surge brakes, which is a lot of boats and U-Haul trailers. And again, accelerating from a stop, that was up a hill with weight on it, and that transmission felt really nice. I think it likes having a bit of a load put on it. Performance with this whole setup, this is really nicely done. I'm very impressed. You know, this is something that I thought could be, I don't know, a little, I just didn't know, because you know, this is Mazda's first time doing this. They've got their CX-50, which is rated for 3,500 pounds. This is the next step with 5,000, but this is their heaviest rated tow vehicle, and I think they've done a very nice job. My only concern is just with payload, because 1,000 pounds is really not a lot. I think some competitors get a couple hundred pounds more, and that would just be my one thing to keep, to caution everybody on, is just, hey, you may need to keep an eye out, or just make sure you look at the door jamb sticker every time. If you're shopping one of these and you've got a couple of them on the lot you're looking at, take a look at the door jamb sticker, see what it says for payload, and maybe choose your options a little carefully if you need a little extra. But yeah, in general, this is doing really, really nicely. I would not be concerned. I mean, like I said, this E36 is behind me. We are getting near the CX-90's maximum tow rating, and this is performing just totally fine. I would be very comfortable. I would tow cross country with this rig with what I've got on it right now. So if you're looking to do some towing yourself with a spec Miata, an E36, an E46, whatever fits within the weight range, I think you would be just fine. Obviously, an enclosed trailer would pose a little bit more of a demand aerodynamically, although I think for the sake of a car, you're not going to get an enclosed and a car with the weight limit that this thing has. So not a huge concern there. But if you're doing a U-Haul trailer or whatever, it'll be fine. This has enough wheelbase on it that I don't think you'd have to worry about stability either with that. All right, that is it for this towing review of the Mazda CX-90 Turbo S Premium Plus. As always, thank you for coming along. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe right here on YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. If you'd like to join a growing community of LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a whole group of people over there that would love to be your new best friends, and hopefully we could meet you at some events, both online and in person. Till next time, please stay safe, be well, see you again soon.